Here are 5 reasons you may find the ASVAB test difficult, but make sure you stick to the end because I'm going to show you some ways to make this test much easier. So first things first, the ASVAB is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. It's essentially the entrance exam for us here in the military in the United States. And the ASVAB is made up of 9 subtests that are designed to help see if you can problem solve and how you apply skills that you might actually use in a job inside of the military. And in that way, it acts as a job placement test as well. Doing well on each of these subtests means that you'll have more opportunities for jobs inside of the military. And now that you have a better understanding of what the ASVAB test is, let's take a look at 5 reasons you may find the ASVAB test difficult. So reason number 1 is that the ASVAB covers a broad range of topics. We're talking things like language and communication skills, mathematical abilities, science and technical knowledge, mechanical and spatial understanding, and practical knowledge. And so that means when you're studying for the ASVAB, you're gonna be studying a lot of different things, and so you can't really focus on 1 or 2 things to study for. You really have to kind of have a good understanding of a lot of base knowledge when you're getting ready for the test, so it can make it very difficult for some people. And on this channel, we have a series of videos that go over each individual subtest, kind of breaking down what's on the test, how to study for it, what kind of questions are gonna be asked. I'll put the links in the description for all of those, and also know that you can find it on militarytestprep.com as well. So reason number 2 is time constraints. Listen, the ASVAB test is timed. It's about 3 hours long. Most people are going to take the test within about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but the whole test can take up to 3 hours to take. And the tricky part about the ASVAB is not just 3 hours to take all the questions. Each individual subtest has its own time limit. So some will give you 7 minutes, some will give you 20 plus minutes, but you have to answer all the questions in that section in the time allotted for that section. Otherwise, the ones you don't answer are completely marked wrong. And what makes that difficult is that you have to figure out the timing of answering questions quickly, plus making sure you have those questions answered correctly in the given time frame. So you can't rush the questions, you can't go too slow in the questions. So managing your time is a significant challenge for most people on the ASVAB. Reason number 3 you may find the ASVAB test difficult is due to the way the test is administered. There are essentially 2 versions of the ASVAB. There's a paper and pencil version and a CAT version, or the computerized version. CAT stands for Computer Adaptive Test. And basically 70% of you, basically all of you watching this video, are going to be taking the computerized version, or the CAT ASVAB. You might hear that a lot from that. But the idea though is that the 2 different versions of it, most people are going to be taking the CAT ASVAB. And the problem with that test is, the challenging part of it at least, is that as you answer questions correctly, the next question that you get is more difficult. If you answer that question correctly, that gets more difficult again. And if you answer one wrong, then the next question becomes easier. So it's constantly adapting to how you take the test. So that can be very challenging, right? You're going to constantly feel like the questions are getting harder and harder and harder, that you're not making any progress on the test. That can be a significant challenge for most people on the test. The other challenge with the ASVAB being the way it's administered is that you can't go back to a question once you've answered it. If you answer C on a question and you submit it, you're done. You can't realize that 3 questions later, the answer to that question was wrong and go back and change it. You're done. Once that question is answered, it's there. That stress level of each question being very important, but also, like I said before, having to do the timing on it can be very difficult for most people on the test, especially the first time taking it. So the 4th reason the ASVAB test can be difficult is the complexity of some of the questions that you'll see on some of the subtests. The ASVAB will not only test your knowledge on a broad range of topics, but it'll also test your ability to apply that knowledge in different contexts. So let's go over a couple examples so you can see a little bit more about what I mean. In arithmetic reasoning, you may be presented with multiple step word problems that require you to not only perform calculations, but also set them up based on the text given. You might need to convert units, use percentages, or apply algebraic principles to find the answer. In paragraph comprehension, the questions might ask you to infer a meaning or identify a writer's main argument, requiring a deep understanding of the text itself. This isn't just about reading, it's about understanding the nuances of language and intention. In mathematical knowledge, you may see questions that ask you to solve for variables, manipulate equations, or understand geometric theorems. You'll need to remember various mathematical principles and apply them correctly to do well on these questions. In the electronics information subtest, you might need to solve a circuit problem that requires an understanding of electrical laws and principles, or identify electrical components and their functions within a circuit. In assembling objects, you'll need to visualize and manipulate shapes in 2 or 3 dimensions, which can be difficult for those who struggle with spatial reasoning. As you can see, all these different subtests have complexity in their questions, and it's not meant to trick you up. It's to make sure that you understand and you're able to apply that information that you know into everyday principles that you're going to be using inside of jobs inside of the military. So the 5th reason the ASVAB test can be difficult is honestly test day. Anxiety comes with any test you're going to take, but this one's super important because it's going to determine if you can even get into the military, and if you do well on the test, what jobs you qualify for. You're also not going to have a calculator on this test. When you walk into the computerized version of the test, you're going to put everything into a locker, go into a room, and you're gonna sit in front of your computer and you're gonna take a test. They're gonna give you a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11 usually, and give you a pencil, and that's the only thing you're allowed to write on. There's also a fatigue factor, right? You've been studying for this test for 2 or 3 months now, and you're going into it, you're gonna recall all this information and put it onto paper or into a computer and try to recall everything that you've learned over the last 2 or 3 months, trying to make sure that everything is aligned correctly. You're gonna be second guessing yourself on questions. You're gonna be like, wait, is 1 plus 1 2? Is that right? Or is that 1 plus 1 2 is 3? Is that 2? Is that you carry? What do I do? That happens. That happens to all of us. Like I said before, you're gonna answer questions that you cannot go back to. So once you answer a question, you cannot go back to it in 3 questions later. This happened to me. I remember exactly the question that I did it on. I had forgotten the formula for something, and then I went to it, and 3 questions later, they answered that formula in the question, and I was like, oh man, I know I missed that question, and I knew the answer now, and I couldn't go back to it. Also on my test day, the air conditioning was not working in my room that I took it in like in a portable, like a container basically. So I went to a room, and it was like 8 stations set up. This was like 20 years ago, to be fair. So,
Damn.
but we had the big monitors with the big TV monitors behind them. Some of you guys don't even know what that means, but the big computer monitors. But when I was in there, the air conditioning was out, so it wasn't crazy hot because I took mine in the end of the year. But it was definitely uncomfortable in there. So that was they had some fans going, so there was some noise there. You also wear these headphones on, and so it's like almost like a deprivation kind of thing. So there's a lot of things that happen on test day that are difficult, and not to say that other tests don't have these as well, but they're definitely going to be adding up. Now for the good stuff, I'm going to show you some ways that you can study for this test and make it much easier. The first thing you need to do is take a ton of practice tests, and I don't mean like study some, take some tests. The vast majority of your time should be taking practice tests. You need to see the questions that you're going to be asked. Now, here's the good thing about the ASVAB. The ASVAB has been around since the 70s. It's been around for a very long time. So the types of questions that they ask, the format in which they ask, and the subjects that they ask are all available and readily available in a plethora of places. If you are a senior or later in high school, and I would argue even a junior in high school, you already know the information that's on the ASVAB. Now, you might not remember it, but you have already learned the information that's on the ASVAB. Now, some of you haven't taken shop or auto classes, so there are some things there, but everything else on the ASVAB, you have already known. You have already been taught this information. So you already have the information in your brain. You need to pull it out and organize it so that you can do better on it. You also have a ton of resources to go to. And most importantly, inexpensive and relatively free resources to go to. So the ASVAB has been around since the 70s, which means that all the questions that have ever been asked, someone has them somewhere in different formats. So it might say John versus Sally in the question, but those questions have been asked and have been reviewed thousands and thousands of times. So what does that mean for you? Is that the study material that you need to actually do well in this test is readily available. Now you can go out and buy on Amazon $20 books that cover the entire ASVAB, and I would actually argue if you're an A and B or even a B and C student, that's probably all you need to do well on the ASVAB. Go buy either through Kaplan or Metrics. There's different places that have these like $20 to $30 test books that you have, like basically covers everything that's in the ASVAB and kind of goes through each individual subtest, kind of gives you some questions and stuff like that. And they, most importantly, this is the most important thing, they have practice tests. Any test that you take that has been taken thousands of times, in this case millions of times, I think about almost 1 million people a year take the ASVAB. The amount of information that's available, when you have that sort of test that you're taking, just take practice tests. That's going to be the best way to do it. So why does that matter, right? Like I said before, you already have the information in your brain. You've already learned these principles. You know about plate tectonics. You know about weather cycles. You know how to read and understand stuff from a book. You know how to do a book summary. You know how to do keyword or vocabulary tests. You do it every Friday. You know how to do all that stuff. You know how to do math. You know how to do basic math. You know how to multiply, divide, solve for X. You know all this stuff. But what you don't know is how to answer it in the context of the ASVAB. And the only way you're going to get that stuff done is by taking practice tests. Practice tests, practice test, practice test, and then more practice tests. I would argue if you're not taking 2 to 3 practice tests a week, you are not studying properly for the ASVAB. Now, and that's not to say you shouldn't be reading up on books that vocabulary books and stuff like that, like word of the day stuff. If you go out to Amazon and buy a $25 ASVAB prep book, I would pretty much guarantee if you actually go through that and do all the practice tests multiple times, do each practice test 3 to 4 to 5 times, I pretty much will promise you you'll make a 50 or higher on that test. Another great thing about the ASVAB, and this will make this test much, much easier, is that not every single subtest matters if you know what you want to do inside of the military. You don't have to study for all of the subtests. You only have to study for the ones that you need for your line scores for that test. So as an example, I was a nuclear power tech. I had to score well in word knowledge, paragraph comprehension, arithmetic reasoning, mathematics knowledge, and mechanical comprehension. But if I didn't do well in one of those for some reason, I also wanted to make sure I understood electronics information and general sciences. Because if I didn't score well enough in the top lines of the first line score I mentioned, then I was able to fall back on these other ones to help me go. So I only need to study those particular line scores. So because of that, I know that the line scores that I need to focus on are word knowledge, paragraph comprehension, arithmetic reasoning, mathematics knowledge, mechanical comprehension, electronic information, and general sciences. Anything outside of that is honestly wasting my time. Now, if I do well on these subtests, these particular ones, if I do well on those, I'm gonna qualify for a lot of things, right? So there are multiple ways to qualify for it, but the point is, I can skip assembling objects for the most part. I can skip auto shop information. Things that I'm never going to do, no job that I have that I even want to, the 5 or 6 jobs I'm looking at, I can look at the things that I want to qualify for and do that. So I can spend, now, not to say that I'm not going to study for those, I'm gonna spend a much, much less time and really focus on my verbal expression, which is word knowledge, paragraph comprehension, also the mathematics, which is arithmetic reasoning and mathematical knowledge or mathematics knowledge. If you aren't sure what you're gonna do in the military, then I would argue that all of them are important because like I said before, the better you do on all of them, the more opportunities that you have. But if you really know what you wanna do, if you have a really good idea of the 2 or 3 or maybe 4 jobs that you want, and I would argue the top 5, you want to kind of see what of the line scores overlap so that you can focus on those 3 or 4 or 5 subtests extensively so that no matter what you do on the test, if you score poorly in one of them, you still qualify for other jobs that you might want inside of the military. Another great thing about the ASVAB, you can retake the test. If you don't do as well as you wanted to on the test, you can wait a month and take a test again. Some people I know for sure in a nuke school, when they went to take the ASVAB, they scored well in the ASVAB. They might have got an 87, but the line score they needed in, let's say, mechanical comprehension was too low. So they didn't qualify for the nuclear power program. So they took a test in another month, studied up for that month, and then took the test again, got into school. So just know that there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of roads that lead to success in the military. Obviously starts with the ASVAB. Doing well on this test means success for you. Opportunities will be open for you. And just remember, there's plenty of information out there to help study. There's plenty of YouTube channels. Obviously, we're a great resource as well. There's books that are relatively inexpensive to buy as well. I just hope that you understand that the ASVAB test can be challenging, but there are ways to make it much, much easier.